It's like doing an ESD in a dirty environment.
That's right.
That's
It's exactly the same thing.
Welcome back to Endoscopy Essentials. In the last episode, you might have been disappointed because we didn't get to the actual technique, but we covered a very important aspect. This is the intra-procedural checklist when not to proceed or modify the procedure. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And so now we go into, you're in the stomach. How does it look like, Barham?
Yeah. So there's a cartoon here. Maybe we'll jump into it so we avoid the verbiage and we have visuals that associated with it. So I'm going to talk about the standard technique, and that's the technique that was used in the randomized trial that published in the Lancet. It's called the MERIT technique. And the technique
It's a nice acronym.
It is. And with that technique the idea is we're using a curved needle with a helical retractor, and we're entering the stomach and we're identifying the landmarks. And here we're gonna pause a little bit. So the first is we're gonna get the suturing device in place. You're gonna identify the anatomical landmark, which is highlighted pretty nicely on this schematic. And you could see, I'm gonna point out here, this is the incisura. You clearly need to identify the incisura because the first principle is you start at the level of the junction between the body and antrum. You don't get to the antrum in this procedure. So then you need to identify the anterior wall. Here's the anterior wall. The greater curvature, which is the gastric folds. Usually they guide you through the greater curvature. And then the posterior wall, which is down here, not up there. And that why it's important is the stomach is, schematically, when we look at cartoon, it looks like a C. But actually it's not a C. It's actually, there's two dimensions to it. It looks like a corkscrew more than a C. So you need to keep in mind these anatomical landmarks, because as you start suturing, which we start distal to proximal, you might twist the stomach, and then you realize that you obstructed the esophagus at the end of the game because you just think it's a C and you keep marching, but while on the other hand, the stomach has changed in the alteration. So each time I do a sequence, I reevaluate where's anterior, where's greater curvature, and where's posterior, and I maintain the actual anatomical configuration of the stomach in that sequence.
By the way, antispasmodics?
Antispasmodic is used. I use glucagon during the procedure. You could use Pascopan,
which we have in Europe.
Which we have in Europe. So yes, I think it's a good idea to use.
Routinely or depending on
how contractile is the stomach during that procedure. So it's I would use them based on the judgment of the operator. But once you get the landmark, so the principle here, you start at the junction between the body and antrum. You end at the junction between the fundus and the GE junction, right? Or the cardia. So you do not want to leave a grapefruit fundus at the end of the day, but you don't want to reach out to the dome of the fundus and pull it down. So at the end of the day, you've done a good job if the size of the fundus is the size of a small golf ball, not a grapefruit. And that's another important principle.
So the proximal orientation, do you have to do it with the device on the scope first to see where you are, or maybe even place a marking, because during the procedure the visibility may get less, or that's a question of experience probably?
It's a question of experience. Initially, place some markers. There's no problems getting dots of APC to highlight these anatomical landmark. But what you realize that each sequence you administer is going to alter the sequence after it. So that's why it's just the construct build itself, and you just need to adopt each time you put a sequence.
It's a moving target.
It's a moving target.
Good. Okay.
So once you identify your landmarks, and you start by starting on the anterior wall of the stomach, and you see here you use the helical retractor in order to pull the entire full thickness. Now this used to be a challenge with the full thickness, but now with the different iteration of the device, getting full thickness is almost guaranteed. There's no such thing as not full thickness anymore, even with the average user, because what have changed is The helical retractor is going in fast with the suturing arm, and by the size of both of them, full thickness is quite achievable in most bites.
How deep do you go, or is it standardized?
It's with the helical retractor, you go deep enough until you get swirling of the tissue. If you don't get swirling of the tissue, you are probably delaminating the mucosa. Once you get swirling of the tissue, you know that you at least engage the submucosa. Yeah. That means pulling
you
up.
Anchored deeply.
Anchored deeply, and now it's swirling.
Okay.
That you're pulling is gonna, the curvy needle is gonna take a full length bite. So the U-shaped is the standard merit shape, which is the basis of most of it. And the U-shaped pattern is, again, you start on the anterior wall, and you could see the forces of the application is about 2 centimeters in the serosa of the stomach at that point. Then you're marching toward the greater curvature of the stomach, as shown here. And
that's a few centimeters?
That's few centimeters, exactly.
Circumferentially?
Circumferentially, and then you go to the posterior wall. So you could see now you have one anterior, one greater curvature, and one posterior. That's the first part of the inverted U. The U looks side U like this. Then now you're gonna flip scope orientation, and that's where flipping the technique is important, because you notice the curvy needle is orienting anterior to posterior on your way to the posterior. Now some struggle with the torqueability and moving their bodies, so they try to maintain the curvy needle from this anterior to posterior going back, and what they do is they create loops in your way back. It's not a standard easy continuous suturing, so on the plication the way back now becomes looped plication. Not the end of the world, but you're not going to be able to go to the next level of techniques of reinforcement, because now you could cinch things together, but you're not going to be able to keep running that suture because it's going to be tangled among itself. So it's very, very important as people learn to take it to the next level to understand how to do what the surgeons call backhand suturing. You need to flip the orientation of the needle. So now it's suturing posterior to anterior in order to avoid these loops among that track, which I think is a very important second principle as we gain more efficiency with this. But you could see now is we're marching back, and you're putting another second proximal posterior. That's the accordion part, which is the longitudinal.
3, 4,
5, 6, exactly. Okay. And then you're going to the greater curvature and then ending it on the anterior wall. So you could see, I'm going to trace the U. You start from here. You went like this. You created another U inverted. You modified the position of the suturing instrument, and you went back to the anterior wall. And now what you could see is you have 2 layers of proline in 2 levels, distal and proximal. And once you cinch, and that's where we're going to demonstrate here, nicely in this cartoon. Here you're ending that sequence now. That's sequence number 1. And now you're cinching it by pulling the suture together. And what's happening is 2 things. You're accordioning the longitudinal length of the stomach, and you're tubularizing the greater curvature. So it's shrinkage, accordion, and tubularization with that sequence. Okay. And that's sequence number 1, and that's the principle. So you repeat that 5 to 6 times, depending on the length of the stomach, and you have the endoscopic sleeve gastroplasty.
Sounds easy.
Sounds easy. And it should be easy.
How about visibility during that process? It gets more narrow. Do you have to insufflate more, or what are the tips? It's bleeding maybe a little bit.
Yeah. So these are very important questions. To me, the frustration happens not from the suturing part, it's from the not respecting that we would like to see things that we do.
The orientation
part, and people do not want to spend the time cleaning. But to me, this is endoscopy, advanced endoscopy. Visualization is important. So now with the modern tools that we have, like the NXT device, you have water jet and you have free suction channel. So in the process,
it's like doing an ESD in a dirty environment.
That's right. It's exactly the same thing. Exactly. But it's even more forgiving than ESD because you're not confined to the tunneling of the ESD. You have more open stomach to work with this. So less stressful for sure. So maintaining visualization is important. Second thing, so clean as much as you can during the process. Second is people want to flog bleeding with traditional hemostatic intervention that they're accustomed to. And remember, we're throwing a bunch of full thickness sutures, you might hit a vessel here, and sometimes you hit a deeper vessel that starts bleeding. We cannot go back to say, oh, hand me an injection needle or give me a bipolar probe. That's where you have the best hemostatic device there is, which is suturing device. Compression. So all you need to do is, wherever you are in that sequence, you either finish it or pause it and pull on the suture itself to compress that area and just wait. It will get hemostatic for sure because you have really good compression in that area, and then you finish your procedure. So do not go say, oh, stop here, you deploy prematurely, you start pulling other familiar hemostatic tools. Use the tool that you have to achieve homeostasis.
Okay, we get it.
Yeah.
So more on that video?
So more in that video, then it's your going that video. So basically, and you're cinching, and you're just, this is the basic sequence, and you're just repeating this more proximally multiple times in order to finish that procedure. So that's...
Well, how do you know when it's enough, proximally?
Yeah, that's...
Or do you just count, and if it's more than 6, you say it must be...
It's not more than 6, it's... As you going more proximally, there's this accordion effect of the stomach. So every sequence you put from distal to proximal is going to pull down that fundus of the stomach. So you're going to realize that at sequence number 4 or 5, you're looking at the GE junction and you are just torquing your body like this and you're seeing fundus. So you keep doing the suturing until the cap of the fundus is visible from the GE junction. That's your signal to stop. I would not go retroflex and start pulling fundus down. I just get to the level where the fundus is visible from the GE junction, and that's probably sufficient to stop that procedure.
If you start this, like in the first 20 or even more, would you advise that you have a second gastroscope at hand, that you do some inspection, how it looks like, without the device on top?
Yes, or you don't even need to reprocess under gastroscope. You could easily remove the suturing device and place it. That's the beauty of this device. It takes literally 10 seconds to place.
But I mean, with a naked gastroscope.
You can, absolutely.
I think it helps training and orientation.
It does. But the principle here is keep the field clean. Whatever you need to do, don't frustrate yourself. Keep the field clean. The procedure is not stressful. I mean, we used to stress because of the unknown of what are we doing from outside, are we hitting major organs? I think all of this has been, for the most part, alleviated. We could do this procedure very efficiently and very safely. So now is breathe easier, realize that this is not a stressful procedure. It could be done, and actually, to me, it's less stressful than an ERCP, which ERCP is not stressful, you know?
So you can leave your beta blocker at home.
You could leave the beta blockers at home. That's right. So now we put the schematic cartoon. Probably your audience would like to see how is that actually done in real life.
I would like to see.
There you go. So we will here. There's this video with already marked anterior wall with this APC. You can see you engage the helix until you get the swirling. You're pulling, and it's just straight pulling into that cup of that device, and you're getting full thickness bite.
You should lose sight, or
you should lose sight, but you could see now here, if you pause, you can see how deep is that bite.
Yes.
It's really engaging the serosa. You could see here's the entry, here's the exit.
But you pull it rather close.
You pull it rather close, but you don't dig the device to the wall.
Okay.
So you want to give the leverage same place and pull, and then lose sight. And you can see now, since this helical retractor is in fast with the suturing arm, the full thickness bite is quite achievable and easy. And this is the anterior wall here that you've seen there. So then we're gonna march. You took the anterior bite. You're gonna go to the greater curvature, and this is the junction between the body and the antrum. As you see, here's the swirling effect, and you're just pulling, and efficiently you're taking that bite. And here's your second bite. You can see how this is very efficient. The stomach starts coming together. Then you're going now to the posterior, and you are engaging the helix. And
isn't that still greater?
Still a greater curvature, and again, in the cartoon we said one bite, but sometimes you put multiple in the greater curvature to distribute the force more. But it's still in the U-shaped configuration. So here you can see 3 bites, 1 anterior, 2 greater curvature, and now here we're gonna dwell on the posterior. And what you see is I flipped orientation, right? See how the suturing device flipped orientation? And now we're engaging the posterior wall, wrinkled, pull, and nice deep bite. And now you have anterior, greater curvature 1, greater curvature 2, and posterior, and you have the first part of that U coming together.
So that shows you take your time, clean in between.
Exactly. Yeah? Actually, it's not bloody if you just, now see how I switched the orientation the way back? Now you're doing posterior to anterior. It requires some finesse to avoid looping your suture, but it's very achievable and very easy to do once you master.
Once you got the principle.
Once you get the principle. And now here you're going back and you're doing greater curvature again, greater curvature 1.
There's not much distance between the 2 lines, like a
1 to 2 centimeters,
okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
And now you've go back and you finish that sequence to the anterior, and that's your U, and you cinch them together. Let's see if we have a picture of that cinching. These are the articulating things coming together, and this is layering on the next iteration of the technique. So what I'm showing you here is once you finish that U, so here is what's not shown in the video, is you're gonna go to greater curvature and then you're gonna end it on the anterior wall. But here this video is paused to show that with these sequences, think about you're creating interlocking digits, right? So peaks and valleys are coming together in the first layer like that. And the evolution to the second iteration of it that builds on the basis of this U-shaped suturing is now interlocking the digits even further for reinforcement. So having more proline happening in that sequence. And maybe that's a good segue to start now migrating into talking about this evolution. But the principle of both the standard or the interlocking is you do the U-shaped suturing and it's you're accordioning the stomach and you're tuberizing its greater curvature. But the first principle here is creating these peaks and valleys that will articulate together. So here's as you cinch, they will come together and creating the first layer of their interdigitation. And here's the second, which is the iteration of this technique. Now the X is where you did the U shape, okay? These X's, so anterior, greater curvature. Now we're putting more bites in the greater curvature depending on the size of the stomach, but anterior, greater curvature, posterior, then going back to the anterior. This is the first basic principle of the U. Now it's with the advanced technique, the interlocking is you start it like this with your finger. Now you're going to put second layer in the mid to interlock them like this.
And that's achieved by which type of modification?
Which is what we call the interlocking ESG. So if you have not, it's the same suture, you don't need to use more sutures, but you need to optimize your technique. So what happens now is we've done the U-shaped suture, then we go and do a second layer that is in the mid of the construct to kind of tighten that interlocking. So let's demonstrate that maybe. So now you finished, I'm gonna pause here. You finished your U, here's your U. Now you're going back with the same suture. You haven't, and you're creating in between these peaks and value, you're creating an interlocking fashion. So let's demonstrate that here. You're going back in the sequence and pulling the peaks and valleys and doing a mid shot. And then here you are transferring in the same sequence and then going to the posterior and going to the mid peak. You're not going to the base of it because the base is already done like this. Yeah. You're going to the mid of it and creating another interlocking digit with the idea here now is we've introduced 2 layers of proline in the first U. That's proline layer number 3. And now we're gonna cross back, put proline layer number 4, and you're gonna see that with the interlocking, you get 6 layers of proline that is very strong. So durability is truly taken to the next level with this. So now this is, you could see, now we did the U at the base, then the U got crinkled, so most people would cinch at this point and they would get not so nice looking and wide sleeve. The interlocking is designed to make it more constricted and more coherently cinched together. And here you could see by introducing that third layer with the same suture, you achieved, even without cinching the construct, you achieved a donut-looking crater curvature. And now we went base with the U, mid with the third sequence, and now we could go tips of that construct with sequence number 4, 5, and 6, and you will see how this would look like in this. So now it's 4th to 6th interlocking layer. We're getting the peaks of these segments, and with the idea that you started interdigits like this, then you became cinch them in a third layer like this, and now you're cinching them more to lock them together in an interlocking sequence with the 4th to the 6th sequence. So let's see how this looks. Now you did your third sequence. Now we're gonna switch the suture orientation again. See how I'm twisting the suture orientation, and now getting the tips of these peaks. I'm not going back to the depth of it. We're getting the tips of these peaks and putting layer number 4 of that sequence. And here we're doing the transfer. You can still see it's not bloody at all. And then you're transferring, and we are going, see how it's now interlocking itself. Then we're putting the helix in the middle and going back to the tip of this anterior construct and taking another bite. So that's now layer number 4 in that sequence. And now we're going to finish it with layer number 5 and 6, all with one suture. So it's very efficient. And now we're going back to the tip, posterior, and grabbing it from here. And that's layer number 5 on the tips of that construct. And then we're going to end it with layer number 6, which is you don't need to go greater curvature anymore. You're anterior, posterior, because it all came together. And now we're going to finish it with the last sequence of that construct, which is, here's the helix. And now we're going to...
So these are 2 layers like posterior, anterior.
Posterior, anterior, exactly, after you built that construct. So now at the tips of it. So look how it's all stitched together. What I call it becomes like a zipper. And why I call it like a zipper, it's like you zip the greater curvature from the greater curvature all the way to the lesser curvature. And now the system is coherently distributing the force in multi-layer, 6 layers of proline, and interdigitizing. That's why it's called interlocking, ESG. Very, very strong. And there's no tension because the tension is distributed on that zipper effect.
Smart.
And cheese wiring becomes minimum. And I could tell you the durability has been significantly enhanced, but here's how it looks, the zipper effect. Here's the greater curvature. You start building this construct of a zipper. You're interdigitating based on the first U. Then you're doing the mid construct and then the proximal construct. And now it's as if fingers came together, interdigitized, and you distribute, here's the lumen, and you're distributing the force over 6 layers of proline introduced by one suture. Very efficient, same suture. You haven't added any levels of complexity. You just followed principles of physics in order to enhance the durability of your construct.
It looks bloody narrow. Can it be too narrow?
Very hard to be too narrow. People freak out that it's too narrow. Actually, I would freak out that it's not too narrow. It's very hard. If you protected the lesser curvature, it's very hard for it to be too narrow.
Does this extended technique mean you need maybe less than 5 or 6?
Yes. So now we used to say we do this with 8 sutures. Now I'm a suture user. I struggle to finish this with 5 sutures, so that cut down 30% of the number of sutures you need, because, and to be honest, it's you had 2 meters of sutures, and we're using the distal tip of it. So it was very wasteful for me what we were doing. Now is you use your sutures that you just opened and maximize its utility, and then switch to another, and it became it distribute the force. And here you could see this is the ISG 5 interlocking. So with 5, we finished this, and it's very narrow from the GE junction all the way to the, here's the GE junction. You can see the squalar columnar junction. Here I could see, you're looking at the fundus. It's a small golf ball fundus, not that big. The interdigitation of the whole sequence. And now we studied this prospectively using the MRI I talked about yesterday and endoscopy. And you could see now we're in the era where you go few months later, this is 6 months later, and you're seeing the tips of these sutures, but most of the sutures are incorporated within this interdigitizing fibrosis. So here's a small fundus that we've left behind.
Looks like a diverticulum.
It looks like a small diverticulum, but the system is coherent, and the contrast. And here you can see the small fundus, just like a diverticulum, not a big not a big grapefruit side of fundus, and the system has healed. And what's intriguing is when you look at MRI from outside, right? Because MRI shows you what's the interdigitating sequence. You could see here's the lumen of the sleeve right there, and you could see the healing sequence. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 that you finish this procedure with, which becomes intriguing that there is way more than meets the eye. People say, oh, there's loose sutures, but most of the sutures actually have fibrosed outside, and you don't even get to see the sutures if you did the job.
That's quite a big wall.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, great.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much. Another cliffhanger, because we want to know the aftercare and what can happen, troubleshooting.
Yes.
Barham, thanks you very, very much.
My pleasure.
So stay with us. Next week we continue.